For True Hollywood Stories, for True Hollywood Dirty Stories, the master, my good friend, Rick Rosen. Anybody who has real estate, good real estate in Tel Aviv, Rick is interested, I think. Please, Rick, come to the stage. Okay. So you invite the other people.
Okay.
You're accustomed to doing promos like me?
I've done them a few times.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Rick.
Thanks, Avi. And my boss, Avi, one of my bosses, and Shira, one of my other bosses, and I have so many bosses here. I can't wait to get back to Los Angeles. I'm going to invite up, and I'll introduce them when they come up here. No, actually, I'll do a little bit of promo before we get here. I'll do this off the cuff. First, I'm going to introduce an old friend of mine for, literally, we started our careers together. We discussed earlier, over 30 years ago. Sandra Stern, who was on a panel earlier today. Sandra is the Chief Executive Officer of Lionsgate Television and one of the great creative deal makers in the television business, and then overall just a really good person. So Sandra, why don't you come on up? I'd also want you to grab a seat. I have no idea which seat, but grab one. I'd like to invite up Orly Adelson. Orly is the newly named president of ITV Studios America, a new job that she's going to talk to us about. Orly has had many, many years of extensive experience in the television business, in the television movie, series, specials business. I'll go through her resume a little bit later. And also my good friend Alan Shapiro, who has an incredible background, also a recovering lawyer like many of us, is currently the chairman of Dick Clark Productions, managing partner of Mosaic, and about 34 other businesses that he's in. So Alan Shapiro. And your former boss. Okay. Lest anyone think that television is a male-generated business, I'll start by saying that we have two very prominent women here, and they've both reminded me twice that they were both have been named in the 100 most prominent women in Hollywood. Many times. But also, in all seriousness, it's great. I'm very proud of the television business. In that most of the executives that I deal with in television on the creative side, and more on the business side, are women, and I think that's a great thing. Let's start by telling a couple of war stories. Okay, so I'll start with Alan. So Alan, like was discussed in an earlier panel, like myself, you're a recovering lawyer.
I am.
Right? You've had a distinguished career doing a lot of different things. One of the things that I'd like you to discuss, because one of the things that I firmly believe, is the notion of not being afraid of risk. And I know at our company, we kind of embrace risk almost to a fault. You, in your career, have done so many different things. You've been a lawyer, you've been a producer of films, you've been a producer of television shows, you've been a manager, you've been an executive producer, you have bought and sold companies. How do you look at business and the challenges of risk?
Well, that's a long story. I'm surprised I've actually lived it. First, I liked my entry into show business was as a lawyer, and I represented a lot of big stars, like Robert Redford and Sean Connery, and rock and roll stars like Queen and ELO, and I loved doing that. The problem for me was that everybody hated paying lawyers, and I watched show business and I saw agents getting paid and business managers getting paid and executives getting paid, so I realized that wasn't for me. I had to get to where there was an opportunity to control the money a little bit more. My experience, and I think, quite frankly, it's one of the things that I find so interesting with Avi is that you need to be an owner and you need to have proprietary interest for me to put your heart and soul into something. And you need to, without risk, there's no reward. And I think in our business, we're in a business of storytelling and passion. And for me, without owning it, I reached a place that there was no expression of the passion. And what I can tell you is that if you don't fail, you've had no career at all. And I think I've learned more from the failures than, quite frankly, the successes. And I've learned more about partnerships in failure and people who I want to be in business with than in success, because good news, everybody's a pal in good news and in good times. But the people who you can count on when it's rough and when things go badly, to me, is the partnerships that I've had that have lasted my entire career.
The famous line, you know, success has many fathers and failures but an orphan. We're going to come back to this notion of risk and some of the analysis of that. I want to go to Orly, sitting next to her former boss, right? So,
Was my boss for 1 year.
for 1 year.
Yes,
But you're
a
sitting,
very good year.
so,
We're still sitting next to each other. That's pretty remarkable.
first of all, as everyone knows, Orly, an interesting story, born in Jerusalem, went to Hollywood. Why don't you give us a little bit of explanation about that, and then we'll talk about the risks that you face in your new job.
You know, it's interesting when you get to Hollywood, and I'm sure there are many here that are on their way, have been there, have come back. I had no option to come back. I married an American, so I couldn't come back. So I had to make it there. But what's interesting, I think, is the minute you're in Hollywood, there's nothing else to do, it seems like. Everywhere you go, everybody's in the show business in some fashion or another. And going back to the notion of risk, because I think every move is a risk, my first one was, give me a room, don't pay me. If I sell, I want to produce, which was pretty daring because I really didn't know much about producing. And I got the room, I sold the project, and I got to produce. And from there, there's no looking back. Because as I sit here, I remember when you created your agency, I would actually call up to see if you had writers, you guys, if you would give me a writer for a movie. So, as Alan said, quickly I learned that you have to own everything you do, and I opened my own company for 15 years.
Again, the notion of taking a chance
Risk.
and risk.
Yes, risk your money where your beliefs are, and that's what I did. And then about 6 years ago, I got a call from Alan's second cousin, who said to me, we just bought Dick Clark Productions, will you run it? And I heard myself say, okay, like a little girl on a phone saying, okay. And next you knew, 2 days later, I was running the company. Until we sold it a year ago, back to Alan, who actually sold it to his cousin and bought it back from his cousin.
We're going to get into that in a second. I want to come back to that. Sandra, so a lot of people would look at your career and say, you've essentially worked with the same group of people for a very long time, a very successful group. And by the way, I think it's one of the reasons why there's been a lot of success wherever you guys have gone, whether it was at Sony, TriStar, or Lionsgate, because there is a sense of you guys know how to work together. But you're known, and I think it probably comes from you, but your company is known as a culture that's willing to take chances and willing to do deals maybe that a Warner Brothers or a 20th Century Fox would not do. Is that a cultural thing? Is that because you had to find your own place in the market? What goes into that analysis?
I think it's a combination. First of all, I want to say this. Even though we have known each other for 30 years, we were only 5 years old when we first met.
We started very young.
We were children. But I started out my career at a a small company where we actually had to take risks. It was with the same team. It was with John Feldheimer, but a company called New World. I remember the first project that we had, we couldn't afford to do it because we were short $200,000. And I said, well, you know what? I went to school in France. Let me go to Paris and see if I can find money. And John said, that's a good idea. It was a terrible idea. But in fact, I found the money, I came back, and we were able to make the show. That was $200,000 for a production company. So I came out of a world where we had to be scrappy, we had to be smarter, we had to think differently. Spent a lot of years at Sony with John Feldheimer, a great company, loved it, and there was always something nagging at me, and I think at John as well, that in a big company, we lost a little bit of the entrepreneurial spirit that's what wakes me up every day, that keeps me going. So at a certain point, John called me and said, I'm at Lionsgate, come start a TV company for me. And I had said to him, I will do that. Pay me whatever you want to pay me. I don't care. But if I can build a company for you, if I can make it my own, I need a piece of that company. And that was the smartest move, the biggest risk, but also the smartest move I ever took. I had to sell my house because when I said, pay me what you want, he didn't want to pay me very much.
To know John is to love
To
John.
know John is to fight with John. But things worked out. We started out that year, we had $8 million in revenue, and this past year we had $500 million in revenue. We built a nice business, and we did that by being owners, by taking an ownership interest, by putting our own selves on the line. Anything that I did that failed, and there were plenty of things that failed, that was my money that was being risked every year.
I'm going to come back to Alan in half a second, but I think this is a very important notion for people in the audience to understand, as whether or not it's money, or for writers certainly it's their vision and their passion is their risk, and when you put your life on the line, like the four of us did, it was not about how much money I'm getting paid. It was always about wanting to follow your passion and wanting to be in control of your own destiny. And I think that also applies to producers and to writers who may be in the audience. I know one piece of advice I always give is not necessarily to write something because the network is looking for something. Write something because you have a vision and you have a passion for it. So Alan, there you were very comfortable at Mosaic, things are going very well. You bought your company, you sold your company, and then you bought your company back again. What went into the thinking about that? Did you question? Did you think, am I losing my mind? Was it strictly just a deal? What was it that drove you, because it's an unorthodox thing to do, what was behind the thinking of that?
Well, the story of Dick Clark is actually an interesting story. When we started Mosaic, I had been in the film production business. And
Let me just interrupt for a second. For those who don't know, Mosaic is one of the premier management and production companies in Hollywood, representing many, many top performers, comedians, musicians. It started with Jim Carrey and many people like that, but just to give some context. So go ahead.
I had ended my partnership in the film production business, and at the time, Peter Guber was just exiting being the chairman of Sony Pictures, and he was setting up Mandalay. And I walked into Peter's office and I said, I split up with a very famous partner, a big producer named Dan Melnick. And I said, I don't know what I'm going to do. And he said, I have plenty of office space. I'll give you a suite at the studio. And he said, we'll talk. We'll think of something. And so I was on the Sony Pictures lot, and I was consulting on business deals, and it dawned on me that if I could put talent management and production together, I could raise capital and start buying companies, which is what I'd been thinking about doing. And I went to some ex-clients of mine, Jimmy Miller and Eric Gold, who at the time managed Jim Carrey and Will Ferrell and Ellen DeGeneres and Vince Vaughn and a number of others, and my partner Chuck Roven, who was a movie producer who this last year produced Batman and Superman, and he had a management company that managed Alanis Morissette and Green Day and the Goo Goo Dolls, and I said, let's put this all together and I'll go out and I'll raise capital. So literally, we met in the room and we said, let's go. So we got together, and then I went and I got capital from a Canadian pension fund. And the first thing we bought was we started to buy music publishing companies, because I viewed that as the sort of the bond portion of our portfolio. Slow, steady, sure. We bought the Aerosmith catalog, we bought the ZZ Top catalog, we bought the George Strait catalog, and we were doing that. And then Dick Clark came on the market. It had been for sale for quite some time. Allen and Company, a big investment banking firm, had put it on the market, and it just laid there. I mean, nobody saw the value in it at all. In 2 years, they couldn't sell it.
And what were the assets?
The assets were a
that you
bunch
saw
of television shows that were perennial television shows. The American Music Awards, the Academy of Country Music Awards, the New Year's Eve show, the Golden Globes. Dick had a library Dick was a big producer, created American Bandstand. He had an old catalog of great music performances from the beginning of rock and roll. And there were some other things, but that was the primary assets. And I said, you know, these assets are like evergreen. And the thing about Dick was, to his credit, Dick realized that you needed to own it. But Dick had gotten to a place where I didn't really think he saw the market value of his own product. And I said, if we bought this and had this as a base, we could start creating more and more things. Very few companies, and you can ask my friends at Lionsgate, every year they have to start over again. Now they've got franchises, but when you have to start over again, waking up every January and know your shows are on the air forever is the greatest feeling in the world. So I thought, if we'll buy this company, we can build off of it. And with our relationships, we can make it into something better. And so we bought it. We were really successful in renegotiating the deals on the shows. And I was trying to recreate American Bandstand. And I had become friends with Simon Fuller, who had created American Idol. And it was maybe the second or third year of American Idol, and he was at this top of his power in the business because it was such a phenomenon. And I called him and I said, let's do American Bandstand together. I think we can get people to watch young people dance on television again. And as a result of that, and we made a deal for American Bandstand. As a result of that, we created this show, So You Think You Can Dance. We brought in Nigel Lithgow, and that show is still on the air and is really successful. And we were starting to generate more and more revenues. We created, on the Golden Globes, we saw the internet. We created, I think, what was the first red carpet. I made a deal with Citibank and Microsoft, a lot of money. We started doing integrations because I saw the relationship between brands and these television shows, and that they were prepared to pay a lot of money to be on screen with you. And we really, in a matter of about 3 years, we tripled to almost quadrupled the net revenue. Under the deal that we had with the pension fund, there was a trigger that forced the sale. And so it was my intention to buy the company for myself. And I was having breakfast with my cousin Mark Shapiro, who had left ESPN and was now running Six Flags, and he was working with a guy named Dan Snyder, who owned the Washington Redskins. And we met, and he said, well, let me help you buy the company. So we put together a deal to buy the company. By the time the deal, I won't go into details, but it was clear that Dan Snyder and I were not long to be in a room together. It was not going to work between the two of us. So we sold the company, even though it really was never my intention. Now, no one should feel bad. I think we put up $30 million, and we got $180 million in about 3 years, so it was all good, and we all cashed the check.
Wait, but I made it really expensive for him to buy it back.
So we all cashed the checks, and what happened was, I was right. I told Dan the company would be worth more money, and I was right. Dan and I didn't belong in a room together. So when the company came up for sale again, Peter Gruber called me again, and he said, let's buy it. I said, do we really want to do this again? And he said, at this point of our lives, all we really care about is doing stuff we love and having a good time. Nothing. And I looked at the company, and I thought, it's really proved out my idea that these kind of assets are irreplaceable. And I think live events have become even more irreplaceable because, like sporting events, they're the water cooler discussion. There's nothing about live events, and they're not really very good to DVR. You want to see them live, you want to see the performances live, and I thought we would buy it back and we could really expand. And in a very short time, we went from the franchise we had. We've added the Billboard Awards to our catalog now because of our ownership. We have the People Magazine Awards, which are going to be on NBC. This is in a year's time. We have a new show called the Hollywood Film Awards, which you'll shortly see on a network. There's going to be another country music show of ours, and now we have this relationship with Kesha. And I think what we have is we have an unbelievable foundation. I think music is important. Everybody's so concerned about television and internet. My belief is that I'm agnostic as to the platforms. We create great content. How the audience decides to get it is their choice. But however they get it, they're going to pay for it. Whether Netflix pays you for it, whether Showtime pays you for it, whether the internet, Yahoo or Amazon pays you for it, if you create great content, there's going to be a buyer out there.
All right, I want to talk about that. Arlie, I'm going to skip and come back to you for 1 second, but I want to talk to Sandra about that issue because I think Lionsgate has been, among the large, or of the large producers at the forefront of these types of shows. How do you guys look at these new platforms? When a producer or a writer comes to you and talks to you about a show, I know that there are more traditional studios that might cringe when they have a deal with someone that says, I want to do something for Netflix or I want to do something for Amazon. How do you guys look at that?
What other people look at as, the thing they absolutely won't do, we look at as an opportunity. We like to say we make a meal out of the crumbs off other people's tables. There are studios that have more money than we do, that are bigger than we. They can do the more traditional things. I've done that for a lot of years. It's not what gets me up and gets me excited in the morning. What is exciting to me is figuring out something new that hasn't existed before, that nobody else has done before, and figuring out how best to use that platform.
But how do you look at monetizing that asset? Because these places, and I'm being provocative here because this is something that in our company we discuss all the time and we want to promote this, but I'm still trying to figure out how my clients can ultimately make money long-term down the road. So how do you look at that? How do you make that analysis? You just did Orange is the New Black. You talked a little bit about it this morning. What's your analysis about that?
Orange is the New Black was actually an easy one. We wanted to work with Netflix. And when you want to do something and you have creator who's passionate about something, you have a project that in your gut you just know is going to work, and you think this is the perfect platform, then, you know, that's when the juices flow. That's when you get excited. That's when you try and figure it out. So I looked at the platform, and we thought, just as I did when I put Weeds on Showtime, it's like, these folks are going to have to pay a lot of money because I don't know what the ultimate profitability is. It's new. I can speculate, I can plan, I can put a model in place, and then it's up to the marketplace, and you don't know what the marketplace is. So I was prepared to take a certain amount of risk. I knew that with Orange, I negotiated a very good deal with Netflix because they were a very risky proposition. I took advantage of New York, we're shooting in New York. We're taking advantage of the New York tax credit money. Our showrunner absolutely kicked and screamed about going to New York, didn't want to go. I gave her $1 million. She kicked less. For the second year, I gave her another $1 million. She's looking for a house there now.
Funny how that works.
Isn't that funny? But we figured if you do a good show, the audiences are going to find it, and the monetary system is going to work. So I knew going in with the New York State tax credit and the license fee, I knew that I was already in profit. It was not going to be huge profit, but my risk was low, and then I could play for the upside because I knew I wasn't going to lose my shirt on it. Sure enough, the international marketplace has embraced it. I have some digital rights. I have off-network rights. We're putting it out on DVD in June, and we have high hopes for that. We know that Genji Cohan, who did Weeds for us, same showrunner, Weeds just killed in DVD. It outperformed. There is something about this woman and her vision and her way of looking at the world that audiences not only want to watch, but they want to own and watch over and over again.
I will say that I've admired over the years your ability to work with some,
Crazy people.
I would just say some colorful people, but that's not for this forum. Orly, okay, so you worked for Mark's cousin, then you worked for Mark. You had a very successful career producing movies for television, series with Mark for ESPN. Now you did this live television that Alan was talking about, which no one can deny has this great excitement to it. And perhaps you guys can talk about some of the dramas that you've gone through over the years in the truck at New Year's Eve or whenever. But now you're starting a venture, you're coming to Hollywood and starting a company that is essentially a foreign company in Los Angeles. Not essentially, it is. ITV is a successful UK company. There hasn't been a great track record with UK companies becoming their own studios in the States. BBC America has tried and has not yet been very successful. What are your plans? Are you going to try to do something differently?
So
How do you look at it?
Let me look at it a little bit differently. Because at the moment, ITV Studios America is the fastest growing television company in America, interestingly enough. They have over 60 shows on the air, which brings us to the question, how come a company who has 60 shows on the air, and bear in mind, I agree, not as many series. The series are coming, the scripted series are still coming from England, and that's what we need to build in America. How come a company who has, I think, more than any other company, more series on the air than any other company, people don't know that it's ITV. Some of it is acquisitions, as we know, some of it is homegrown. But I think what's interesting there, it's a company that is ripe to make this leap. First of all, we have to connect between perception and reality. So everybody knows that the fastest growing company. They have a lot of money to invest in the series business. which I wouldn't have taken it unless I knew that the formats came in, so I have something to start it off with.
Will they be in the series deficit business?
Correct, yes. So they're willing to deficit, they have the formats, and they're already making overall deals with producers. So it's jump-starting that company and that division within the company, but the rest is working pretty well. So it didn't feel to me as a huge leap. It felt to me as a huge opportunity.
And obviously, well, I shouldn't say that. I mean, are you going to look at all different platforms? Are you going to be in the broadcast television business, the cable television business? How do you feel about the emerging platforms?
I'm
like
a big
Lionsgate?
believer in the emerging platforms. As Alan will tell you, he launched the first red carpet, online red carpet, but it took 2 years between his and then us creating an amazing division at Dick Clark Productions that is all internet-based, based on the shows that we had. So I'm a huge believer. I think it transformed in some ways Dick Clark Productions and brought it another step to where, as I said before, Alan had to pay a little bit more. But I think that throughout my career, all the movies that I made were always the first for a cable that just got into the business. You just have to make it work. Make the numbers work, as Sandra said. I'm a big believer in making it work and taking the risk.
Let's try to have some fun here and talk about some horror stories, because we all have them. And I think that people like to hear some of these stories from... We're assuming that this is not going to be public, within 20 minutes, but what's it like being in the truck at one of these live events? We talked earlier that you guys neither of you have seen a New Year's Eve outside of a truck in many, many years. What are some of the things that can go wrong? Is there anything in particular that stands out that, may have shortened your life expectancy?
Many of them. It's funny, when you work with the country music group, by the way, I came into the Clark production, I never produced a live show. So that was pretty daunting. All they did are live shows. So the first thing that I produced was the Country Music Awards. You walk in with a smile, they smile back at you, and they're all really nice people. So you are disarmed, and then you have an artist, and I'm thinking, should we say Tim McGraw? Oh, what the hell? Tim McGraw walks on the stage, and he looks around, and he said, "That's not what they promised me. I'm leaving." "You're leaving? It's my first show. I've never done a live show in my life. What do I do?" And I'm begging, and I'm asking, and I'm doing, and he's not coming back. And I said, "We can get you, it's Glass." And Glass has been the bane of my existence in these shows, with Lady Gaga too. And he said, "No, I don't want it, now it's too late." And he walks off the show. I would say it was about 8 hours before a live show, and you have to fill the time. There is no way you are live for 3 hours and you're not gonna deliver CBS 8 minutes short. And so...
Well, that, in my experience, is a bad thing. Not good. Especially CBS. Right.
Les doesn't like it. And lo and behold, this year we did a special with Tim McGraw. Cut 4 or 5 years later, and we did a special with him. But the Lady Gaga is the same. She wanted Glass. And if she didn't get Glass, it was like 4 sides of a glass panel, and we explained to her, Glass won't fly. We can't do Glass. I mean, it's live television. People will get hurt. And for her, it
No
didn't
Glass.
matter what we wanted. She had a vision, and if you didn't give her the vision, she will not be there.
Alan, let me ask you something. One of the things I find kind of interesting over the last, I guess it's about 5 to 10 years, was that the Golden Globes were always this nice event that the stars loved coming to because it was like a dinner party at the Beverly Hilton. And it was televised, but it was modestly televised. But everybody went, and it was the hot ticket, and everyone loved being there. And then something happened about 5 years ago where it became the event. And I'm sure if we looked at NBC's ratings, and you would know better than I, they've skyrocketed. Every year they get bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
What happened?
Wow, it started just as I was leaving, and it really prospered with Orly. But I really think that it just caught on of how much fun it was. And in some ways, there was a dip in the Academy Awards at the same time as a television event, not as its importance, and certainly the Academy Awards are coming back, but there was a moment in time when the Academy Awards, maybe it was after Billy Crystal had stopped being the host, and he had been such a great host, and they really couldn't find a substitute for him. The Academy started to dip, and people started to, and I also think it was how important television became too. HBO changed the whole landscape of television. I think if you look at whether it's 6 Feet Under or The Sopranos, that changed, and so television started to rise in some ways creatively, I think, to equal the movie business and how much the fans wanted to see those people and how big of stars they were. The pure fun of whereas the Academy Awards kind of are stiff and tight, the Golden Globes, everybody's drunk, you know? I mean, it's like you got movie stars and television stars, and they're hanging out and they're switching tables, and it just, you know, we all know this, that you can do the best work you can, and then you got to catch show business magic. I mean, you lay the best plans, and what happened was the public just found it. And so things were moving in the right direction. I think hiring Ricky Gervais, bringing a host where they never had one, and then ultimately now this last year with Amy and Tina, which I think is maybe, you know, without trying, you know, be too not modest for both Orly and I think maybe the best hosts of an award show, their performance, how much the fans love them, and all of it worked together to just create something special.
I have to tell you, with Ricky Gervais, I was in the truck talk about things. Ricky
Be
rehearsed.
careful, he's a client, so just...
Ricky rehearsed everything in the room. Rehearsed every word. I saw every word. He didn't deviate by a word. I was sitting in the truck, and he started his jokes, and I got smaller and smaller and more scared, and here's my job, and I lost my job, and how could I allow these jokes to go on, and what did I do? Literally myself and the NBC executive was sitting there thinking it's the end of our careers. Interestingly, I left the truck, and everybody came to me and said, "Oh, it's the best show you've ever seen." It's the perception of somebody who is and listen, the pressures of live television we know, but Ricky was unbelievably
There's a sense
edgy.
of a little bit of danger.
Yes, that's what made it work too. But from the person who was sitting behind, in every joke I heard before, it sounded different with Ricky on the stage.
We had a show, actually just last 3 weeks ago. We bought this award show called the Hollywood Film Awards, which has been around but has never been on network television, soon to change. And you know, because we talked about it, we wanted this year's show to be the biggest because we were going to have all the network executives there. And of course, the next day I was going to have you call them and see if they wanted to buy it. And we really worked, and we had big stars. We had Sandra Bullock and Julia Roberts and Sean Penn and Robert Downey and Jake Gyllenhaal and Matthew McConaughey. We had big stars. And the first award was going to be to Steve McQueen, a director who's done this wonderful picture called 12 Years a Slave. And, you know, in the furor to have big stars at the moment, we approached Kanye West about giving him the award. And he said yes. Now, he's on this concert tour, and all of a sudden, he's canceling dates. And then I find out from a very good friend of mine, who's Irving Azoff, that he is going from our show. He's going to come to our show. He's going to leave. He's going to take a jet. He's going to fly to San Francisco, and he's going to propose to Kim Kardashian. He's the opening night, number on the show, and I'm thinking, he's going to cancel for sure. I mean, he cancels concerts. I mean, and now my stomach is just, I'm thinking like, I must be the dumbest guy in the world. I booked Kanye West to open a show that I'm trying to sell. But to his credit, he showed up 20 minutes early. He did press, he did everything. But when you do live programming, and now I'm partners with Keshet, they're going to take it one step farther with this Rising Star, which, has that tension of live television, and the results are live. When you do it, your stomach's in your mouth half the time.
Talking about tension, Sandra, you've been involved with some of the more public negotiations over the last few years. Mad Men being probably the most well-known. I know you can't say what you can't say, but what can you talk about the tension that you face with deadlines and what you were dealing with, knowing that you had this great show that was an important asset, and you had intransigence. And from my perception on the outside, I had nothing to do with it, but it looked like you had intransigence on both sides of you.
It was one of the most challenging, one of the most exciting, in retrospect, things I've ever worked on. It was a negotiation that went on for about a year. And it should not have been. I actually only came in probably the last 2 weeks, when I got a call from one of your competitors who was representing various people there saying, we need you to come to CAA. Everybody's getting in a room. Everything is turned to shit. Nothing is working. You've got to come and see if you can sort it out. And it was only because I had not been involved in much of the negotiation. The network decided to take it over. My main involvement was at one point saying, I'm over all of this. I filed a lawsuit. I tried to take the show from the network to bring it someplace else. It was like, life is too short. And then I remembered my father said, you have to care to fight. So came back, we canceled the lawsuit and went back and fought and ultimately closed the deal in 2 weeks. But it was about 3 o'clock in the morning. I was on the phone with Matt Weiner's lawyer.
Who was it? She was
Jeannie.
in the hospital, wasn't she?
She was in the hospital.
Right.
His agent was on vacation.
I didn't know agents took vacations.
This was an agent who took a vacation.
Hear that, Avi?
He was actually working. His vacation was George Clooney was his client, and he was doing a movie, and he had to go to the set of the movie. So he called me from the set of George Clooney's movie.
Things are tough.
Yeah, right. And the lawyer representing the network, and they called me at about 3 in the morning, and I kept dozing off. And at about 3 o'clock, just as we had the last final deal points done, I get a call from Matt's agent saying, he's kind of thinking about it. He doesn't think he wants to write the show anymore. And
What do you do at that point? Did you
If you
believe
me,
it? Did you think it was a bluff?
I said, you tell that fucker he's doing this show or I'm going to kill him. And he believed me. I was a crazy woman.
I don't blame him.
And we closed.
So I think we all agree that the reason, at the end of the day, we're all in this business, and I think why the people are in this room, is that we love storytelling. We love content. And whether the content is non-scripted, or whether it's live shows and music, or whether it's great scripted programming, we love the content. And I know that this sort of thing is said all the time, but is there one thing that you did that you were incredibly proud of, or one thing that got away from you that you wish you had done? Can anyone think of that?
I think of what I'm most proud of, and it's odd. It won't be all the big shows that we've done together, from the Globes to... It's actually my first series, which was Playmakers. It was the first time I did a series.
ESPN.
ESPN. It was the first time ESPN did a series. It was a new model, because nobody did these low-budget models, and it won a lot of awards. And it was a thrilling experience that you immersed yourself completely into the process and succeeded. That would, by far, would be my proudest moment.
The thing I'm most proud of is actually not a show, but a process, and it took place with Orange is the New Black. When we first started casting and we first started production, and we were absolutely... The DNA of Lionsgate, my company, unlike a lot of other companies, is we don't give a lot of notes, we don't advise. Our mantra is we should hire the smartest people we know, the most creative people we know, and then help them, step aside and let them do what they do. And when Genji started casting, we thought she was making a terrible mistake. Terrible mistake. We didn't know what we were going to do. We just didn't know what to do. And the proudest moment that I have in my career, I think, was that we did nothing. We stepped back, we trusted her, we let her do it. She was right. I went out and bought her a car to say, thank you for being you. Seriously true.
You know, as an agent who helps put these shows together, I often wonder why it is that the networks and the studios fight so hard and pay all this money to get these incredibly talented people and then get in their way all the time and not let them do, sort of pursue their vision. And I think that's a great story, because I think that's should be done more often. Just let people do their thing. There's so many shows fail anyway. At least let the visionary and the creator win or lose on their own merits. Yep. Alan, anything that you think from the film business or the television business?
We had nothing to do with show business. I had an opportunity to buy a casino about 10 years ago and didn't do it. It was the saddest moment of my career.
He still showed me the casino he could have bought.
Well, that's a form of content, I suppose.
Absolutely.
Perhaps now we can take a few questions from the audience if anyone here wants to ask questions of this group. Do we have? There've got to be a couple of questions. Someone ask. Here we go, right there. Yes, sir. Stand up or yell. How do you, the question is, how do you handle the egos of the people that you represent? Well, since I'm the only one who represents them.
Right.
You know, I think that's overrated, and I think artists have egos in the same way that executives have egos, and network people, studio people, and I think there are some people that are higher strung than others in all walks of life. Business people also have big egos. I happen to side with the artists because I believe when they're putting themselves on the line. When you're a writer and you've put your passion into something, and then you're putting it out there for people to read and criticize, and some of these people have been doing this job for about 10 minutes. It takes a lot, and if you're a performer and you've put your all into a piece, and you're out there exposed, it takes a lot. So, yeah, but yes, there are people who are more high-strung than others, but I find it on the other side too. I've had plenty of network and studio executives lose their temper with me over the years. Anyone else? Over there, in the back. Yes, yes, ma'am. S-
I think the best thing to do is try not to be an asshole too often. Now that's my words of inspiration. No, as we were discussing last night, it really is a very simple thing. We have great respect for the creative process. We have great respect for the people we work with. We don't look upon the writers and producers and actors who come and work punishing hours under sometimes pretty horrendous conditions, really killing themselves. We don't look at them as cogs in the machine. And I think that that has paid off for us and for them. We try and encourage people to do their best work and give them the opportunity and not ride them too hard too often.
I just wanted to say that I think the interesting thing about show business, and it has its things that you can criticize about it, but it's a meritocracy. Just like sports, there are almost no other businesses that you can go from being an assistant and answering phones to become the head of a studio or the head of in fact, at the agencies, you have to start doing that. And I think you'll see whether it's across, the sexes, men and women. Show business is a meritocracy, and if you've got talent, there's an opportunity to rise. And I think there are very few other businesses, with all the criticisms we have about how shallow it is, that's true.
Orly, along those lines, there are people in the audience who are similarly situated to where you were, when you were in your 20s. Now that you're in your 30s,
Thank you.
Perhaps you can give the similar advice as if you're an Israeli writer or producer and you want to get your product shown, get to Hollywood.
They have a huge advantage now, because when I was growing up here, there was no connection really between Hollywood and Israel, except that every so often we had some famous person come to Israel, and we would all be very excited. And then, and that will go away, and most television that we watched was British, not American. Now, every producer in Israel has a connection to somebody who's connected to the US. You come here, and I'm sure you meet with every producer and writer. I say it's not about money. A lot of people, their attitude is, okay, so the American wants it, so for sure there's money in it. And they go for the money versus go for the project. And the first thing we all do is first try, when we set up something or when we find something we love, we find a home for it, and we don't haggle that much. We want to make it happen. So my biggest advice for everybody is, if there is a home, if somebody wants it, if you believe in the project, eventually money comes.
That's really good advice. Anybody else out there? Another question? I saw one in the back. Was there someone in the back? No more questions? Last chance? Go ahead.
Talking about women, okay? There was a question there about women. I got my job at Dick Clark Productions. My third phone call after I closed my deal, after I told you all not to think about the money, I called Sandra. And I said, Sandra, I just got this company, and I need you to teach me everything about the deal making that is connected to the shows we were going after at the time. It was some reality shows that we wanted to do. And she got on the phone and she walked me through 5 deals. She lined up 10 lawyers for me to meet. We were hiring a new lawyer. And I have to say, when now I'm on the board of Women in Film, and we had a board meeting, and I can't say more than that because I'm sure of that. But Sandra's name came up for getting on the board, and it was so easy to pick up my hand and say, "Oh, she helps women. I know she helped women. She helped me." So she is a model.
That's lovely. Lovely. Anything else from anyone after that great and deserving testimonial? Thanks, everyone.